I'm Joshua Bardwell, and you're going to learn something today. Betaflight 3.4 release candidate 1 is out. 3.4 release candidate 1 is out, and you can try it out right now. Oh yeah, you know you want to download it. I'm going to show you how to download it. I'm going to show you how to install it, and I'm going to tell you all about it. Stay tuned. Yes, that's right. There's a new release of Betaflight right around the corner, Betaflight 3.4. It's been scheduled for release in the July-ish time frame ever since Betaflight 3.3 came out in January-ish. Wow, 6 months ago. For everybody out there who says, oh, Betaflight releases too often, it's so hard to keep up. Can you believe it's been 6 months since the last one? Well, anyway, here it is. It's coming. Release candidate 1 is out. And if you're brave enough to try flying a release candidate, then I'm going to tell you how to download it and how to install it and try it on your quad. And I'm going to walk you through some of the new features of it. There's actually some pretty exciting stuff in this one. I know I say that every time, but, well, it's true every time. Let's take a look. And as always, when I want to learn about a new Betaflight release, I'm going to go to the GitHub Betaflight releases page, and there's a link to this down in the video description. This is where every new release or pending release of Betaflight goes, and the valuable information you're going to find here is the release notes, which you're definitely going to want to check out, especially if you're going to try the release candidate where not everything has 100% been shaken out. Downloading released versions of Betaflight without looking at the release notes is usually safe, but still a good idea. But for release candidates, you're definitely going to want to check this out. And the first thing you're going to want to check out is important information when upgrading, which focuses on changes that are especially relevant. If you just try to copy over your settings from the previous version, you're going to get yourself in trouble. Now, one of the biggest things the Betaflight devs have done in 3.4 is they've gone back and they've reevaluated a lot of the defaults. So you can see here in the configurator that the default PIDs have changed. The default D gains are a little lower. The default P gains are a little lower, higher, I don't know. And the filters are way, way different. Now, if you're following along at home and you've gone in your configurator and your filter settings tab doesn't look like this, that's because you have an older version of the configurator. You can see my configurator version is 10.3.0. This is a non-released version of the configurator, at least at the time I'm making this video. And if you need to, you can go ahead and download the configurator version from a link I've put in the video description. So the filters have changed, and the biggest thing you're going to notice is that, number one, there are two sets of filters now. There are two sets of filters, profile independent and profile dependent filter settings. And you can see that there's a gyro low pass and a D-term low pass. Now, this has always been true. There's always been a gyro low pass and a D-term low pass, but the configurator didn't break out the option to change all of the settings of the gyro low pass. You had to go to the CLI. So all of the gyro low pass settings and all of the D-term low pass settings are now in the configurator. And you'll notice also that there are two gyro low passes and two D-term low passes. So back in Betaflight 3.3, we got introduced to the stage 2 filter, which kind of was a Kalman filter, but then it kind of wasn't. And then there was a whole big, it worked really well. And in fact, it worked so well that the devs have decided that it's okay to turn off all of the notch filters by default, because these low pass filters, they've found combinations of low pass filters that provide better handling, better flight handling, lower latency, and equally good noise reduction. And the default settings will work pretty well, but there are some suggestions on the wiki for how you might want to tweak these depending on, your personal risk profile. This page is tuning tips for Betaflight 3.4. And by the way, it starts with, I just want to fly, not read all this stuff. No problem. Remember, this video with all the details is for nerds who care about details. If you are feeling annoyed and overwhelmed at all this stuff, just stop. Just go fly. Just flash the defaults and go fly. Okay? You don't have to care about all this stuff. Okay, if you do care about this stuff, though, down here are some suggestions for filtering depending on how much vibration and noise isolation your quad has and how much of risk tolerance you have for smoking a motor should anything go wrong. Here are some suggestions for low-pass filters. But the defaults, as you can see, are set up for most people. And another big difference in the defaults is that now the dynamic filter is also enabled as default, and that is one reason why it is safe to turn off all the notches, not just because of these low passes. The dynamic filter is a notch filter that is dynamically adjusted. So wherever the noise is the strongest, that's where the filtering is the strongest. And this is updated 1,000 times or something a second. It's updated in real time. And I just learned this. It is uniquely applied to each of the roll, pitch, and yaw axes. So if there's vibration at one frequency on roll and another frequency on pitch, the dynamic filter, that no notch filter can do that, because the notch filters are the same on every axis and they don't move around. Here's a change that everybody can appreciate. The functionality of crash flip mode, also known as turtle mode, has been improved. So right now, the way turtle mode works is that when you're in turtle mode, you can push the roll stick left, right, or the pitch stick front, back, and the two motors will spin to flip the quad to the side or flip it over, but only two motors will spin. The yaw axis is ignored, and it's not possible to spin just one motor to sort of flip the quad diagonally. And this can get you into trouble if you're in a situation where, three of your motors are bound up. Maybe you just want to spin the one. Or if you're in a tree, one of the best uses of turtle mode is not to flip the quad over after a crash, but to sort of shake it out of a tree. And being able to use the yaw axis to sort of jiggle the quad out of a tree can also be advantageous. So turtle mode now allows you to, number one, spin diagonal motors using the yaw stick. And number two, if you push the pitch and roll stick diagonally, only one motor will spin. And if you push it to the side, two motors will spin. So it gives you a little bit more flexibility in which way you try to move the quad when you're in turtle mode. Betaflight 3.3 was not optimized for the F7 chip, which meant that even though the F7 chip was faster than the F4, Betaflight actually ran slower. And it meant that on Betaflight 3.3, if you wanted to run 32 kilohertz gyro sampling, all that advanced stuff, the F4 was actually the chip you wanted. You had to overclock it a little bit, but it would actually run much faster. Betaflight 3.4 has been optimized for the F7 chip and can take full advantage of all the extra speed and so forth. So if you're wanting to run 32 kilohertz and that stuff, you can now use an F7 chip without giving up any of your performance. Betaflight has not traditionally made good use of GPS sensors. If you even have a GPS sensor on the quad, it would show the GPS coordinates, and in recent versions they added a direction home and distance to home arrow. But Betaflight doesn't have any any autonomous flight characteristics like loiter, like return to home, and so forth. In Betaflight 3.4, it still doesn't have full autonomous flight, but it does have what they're calling GPS rescue. And that means that there's a mode you can initialize as a failsafe, or you can trigger it manually, I suppose, and the quadcopter will attempt to fly back home again. And this is nice for those of you who they still want the sort of acro and racing flight handling of Betaflight, but especially for freestyle pilots or maybe people trying to do longer distance stuff, the ability to have the quad use the GPS to return to home in the event of a failsafe is really desirable. And it means that for those of you who want that minimum level of GPS functionality without giving up the performance of Betaflight, you don't have to go to iNav and give up D-Shot and all that stuff just to get that GPS functionality. Another exciting thing that's been added is the use of GPS for altitude estimation. So in previous versions of Betaflight, only the barometer was used for altitude, even if you had a GPS, whereas now they'll use both of them and do sort of sensor fusion, and I don't know about, but basically the GPS can increase the accuracy of your barometer when doing altitude estimation. This one is going to blow your freaking mind. Despite the cryptic name of the pull request, this allows Betaflight to pass through your transmitter stick commands as a USB game controller to your computer. In other words, you can use your flight controller as a wireless interface to let you use your transmitter to play a simulator. Like this thing. This is a little USB dongle that I've got that lets me attach my Tyrannus to my computer. Don't need it anymore. Oh, man. Oh, it's a shame that it wasn't on camera. It went right in the trash. No look. Right in the trash. But that's not all. You can also now use the USB port on your flight controller to read your SD card if you have an SD card reader on board. So if your flight controller is buried inside your quad and it's a pain in the butt for you to pull the SD card out in order to read your black box files, you don't have to do that anymore. You can now use USB and just read directly through the USB port. Here are a couple other new features that I think are worth calling out. Acro Trainer mode has been added. What this is the quad flies in acro mode, but it will refuse to go past a certain angle so that you kind of got a little bit of a safety net when you're learning to fly acro. The quad won't just like turn upside down, fly a zillion miles an hour into a wall. It'll just hit a limit and stop. Support has been added for throttle limiting. Now, this is something that some racers have been doing in their transmitters. They've been, they'll limit the throttle like 95 or 85%, and that helps them not abuse their batteries quite so much and let the quad last a little bit longer. Now it's something you can do in Betaflight, and there is a throttle limit type, which determines whether the throttle curve is scaled down or just clipped off at the top, and a throttle limit percent, which lets you reduce the top end of the throttle. The Iterm Relaxed feature is a modification to the PID controller that helps reduce Iterm-based bounce back at the end of aggressive moves like flips and rolls. And this really surprised me because I've seen the Betaflight devs work on Iterm windup and Iterm-based bounce back. For a long time, they've been working on fixing this issue, and it seemed to me like it had largely been solved. But people who've flown this new one there have been bounce back at the end of flips and rolls that we've tried to tune out with, well, I've tried to tune out with P and D, and I'm being told that no, actually it was the Iterm the whole time, still causing problems. So the Iterm Relaxed feature is supposedly going to help with that. I'll be really interested to see what effect that has on tuning. The next feature is one that has been asked for a long time, and I've actually argued that it's technically infeasible. Well, Steve C. Evans has proved me wrong. The feature is the ability to map an adjustable parameter like a PID, like a P gain or whatever, or a rate, directly to a slider, so that as you raise or lower the slider, the value changes in real time based on the position of the slider. Right now, the way in-flight adjustments work is when you push the stick up or push it down, the value goes up or down, but it goes at a consistent speed. It's not related to an actual position. So what people want to be able to do is while they fly, just kind of nudge the P gain down or nudge it up just slightly. You can now do that, and that's super exciting. It does check out the pull request that you're seeing on screen right now, because there is a little bit of documentation to it. It's non-trivial to set up, but if you really want that, now you can have it. I've done some test flying of Betaflight 3.4, and I've got to tell you, this feature is the one that I think I noticed the most on the sticks. All the changes to the filters and so forth, if you have a really good flying quad already, you're probably not going to see a night and day difference. But this one, when you turn it on, I think you're really going to feel it. It's called Throttle Boost, and what it does is as the throttle is moving up or down, it boosts the output of the motors. This is actually mathematically exactly like the D-term set point weight. If you know what derivative is, or you know what a feed forward is, basically as the throttle is going up, the throttle boost function makes it get there faster. It amplifies that climbing throttle. And it's kind of like a throttle curve. My experience flying it is that it's kind of like a throttle curve in that you get more power lower in the throttle, but only when you're really spiking the throttle. When you're moving the throttle slowly and smoothly, you get your normal throttle curve. So it's kind of like the best of both worlds. You see, the problem with the throttle curve is that if you have lots of power low in the throttle, it'll be really hard for you to hover. You won't have a lot of precision. So with the throttle boost feature, you get all the precision of your normal throttle curve, but at the bottom of a split S, or when you suddenly see an obstacle and you're like, I have to get throttle now, I need power. When you jam the throttle in that situation, the motors respond much more aggressively. And I have to say, it kind of makes a bigger, heavier quad feel like a lighter quad. It's a pretty cool feature. I'm looking forward to playing with it and seeing just how much boost I like in my throttle. I think that for those of you on very light quads, though, I feel like this is going to be maybe not so much a feature you're going to want. I could be wrong about that, but it feels like light quads already have a super responsive throttle. Heavier quads, you enjoy that extra boost. It'll also depend, I guess, on the props you're using, since those with heavier props or less responsive motors may benefit from this more than those with light props and very responsive motors. So how do you install Betaflight 3.4 Release Candidate 1? And by the way, if you're seeing this video a month from now, then it's not a release candidate anymore. It's probably just released. So just go to your firmware flasher and pick your board and pick Betaflight 3.4 and just flash it. But if it's still in the release candidate window, what you're going to need to do is check the Show Unstable Releases button, and then you'll be able to choose 340 RC1, or as time goes on, there will be RC2 and RC3 and so on, and then eventually a full release. And you can just flash that to your board per usual. Do keep in mind, though, that as is suggested in this window here, don't just copy your old configuration, especially your PIDs and your filter values. Don't just copy them from the previous version, as a lot has changed. And the recommendation that they make is here in the tuning tips page, which again I will link in the video description if you have trouble finding it, is to just start with the defaults, fly it, then you can start enabling some of these other features and playing with the new features. But that's the suggestion. The one thing you will need, though, is you will need the configurator version 10.3 or higher, which at the time of this video's release, you can get. I'm personally hosting it on my OneDrive. There's a link down in the video description, or after the official release, I'll update that to the official release page. And that's going to do it for this overview of the new features in Betaflight 3.4. No, it's not all the new features. For those of you who are like, but wait, what about RC interpolation smoothing and CMS over crossfire? Yeah, there's some features in there that I think will not have as much of a direct impact on people's experience, and I try to focus on the biggest ones to keep this video as concise, not really, as possible. I will be covering many of these features in individual videos going forward. I'm really looking forward to 3.4. It's just so exciting to see the development that happens in Betaflight and all the new stuff in new versions, and really looking forward to this. Let me know what your experience is flying 3.4. How do you like the new filters? Did they smoke your motor, or does your quad fly better than it ever did? And if you find anything that you think is a bug, make sure to go to GitHub and raise an issue. That's the whole point of release candidates, is to get all you morons to try this out. Ha 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 ha, suckers. No. It's pretty well tested by the time it's a release candidate. But if you do find a bug, comment on GitHub and raise an issue for the devs. Thank you guys so much for watching. Looking forward to seeing your comments down below. Happy flying.